it's easy to start throwing these labels on ourselves when these things come up, and you can definitely overeat without binging. The easiest way I like to explain it to clients when I'm talking and have this conversation is like binging is like, think about like when you are eating so much food that you get to this point where it's like, it's almost like you like lose that sense of control, basically. Is the easiest way I can usually describe with people is like you've gone to that point where like you're eating just because, like, it's just, you gotten to this point and it's almost like you can't pump the brakes. You can't turn around. You're just in this full-fledged until basically the Oreo package is empty, basically, until you have that physical barrier to cut you off. I think that's something that's really important to differentiate, and overeating can sometimes lead into binge eating eventually if you add in that habitual piece into that. If we have a day where it's just like, you know what, like work was awful today, I'm just going to eat this carton of ice cream and call it a day. That's more like overeating.
Welcome to Cut the Crap with Beth and Matt, the world's #1 no bullshit health and fitness podcast.
Are you ready to cut the crap with your diet and exercise, get strong as fuck, and build a healthy relationship with food? Then you've come to the right place.
Let's go. If you'd like to support us in the podcast, join our Patreon where you get exclusive content, which consists of monthly workouts you can do at home or at the gym, monthly challenges that are either strength, habit, or mindset based, and access to over 100 plus low-calorie, high-protein, family-friendly meals. These are all designed by a professional chef who is certified in nutrition. These recipes are already in MyFitnessPal for easy fucking tracking. New recipes are also added each week.
We believe that fitness is for everyone, so this is our way of getting you started on your health and fitness journey at a price most everyone can afford. So what the fuck are you waiting for? We'll see you in the Patreon.
All right, Chasing Health. How are you?
In the house.
Doing well. How are you guys?
Pretty good. On a snowy Wednesday.
Same.
Steady and slow the snow is.
Mm-hmm.
Not snowing here yet.
No?
Until tonight. Chase, where are you located right now?
Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Okay.
See, Beth and I were talking earlier. I was like, I think he's from Grand Rapids so it's pretty close to me. I'm in the Toledo area.
Okay.
We'll have to collaborate or something sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be great.
Just land back there? Are you now there for good?
For now, yes. So long story short, I grew up in Virginia my entire life and moved up here just because of a friend. We were both planning on moving either to like Austin or Colorado or something like that. We had a plan to move somewhere else, but he had to be here for a while longer. So we moved up here. And then just financially, we weren't in a good spot to move just yet. So we were like, all right, let's just stay here in Grand Rapids for a little bit longer, work on the business side of things, because he's also a coach as well. And so once we get that nailed down, we're hoping to move maybe somewhere warmer or, to somewhere at least where it's going to be fun and cold.
Yeah, just cold and snow is just for the point of having cold and snow is not fun.
No, exactly.
You can't go hiking or anything like that. Like
exactly.
No, I went out.
Yeah.
Yes.
I want out already and it's...
Yeah, you've been getting hammered with snow.
I'm done.
Yeah.
My mood completely changes this time of year. I feel like I do not thrive in this weather. Like it's fucking gray like every single day and my mood shows it.
Yeah. It's just not fun. And I know it's so easy for everyone to be like, oh, just, go put on some warm clothes and go out for a walk or whatever like that. I'm just like,
it still sucks.
What doing this weather?
Right.
Like, I'm going to be straight honest.
I'll do it, but I'm going to bitch and complain the entire time.
Exactly. Thankfully, our apartment complex has a little gym and they have a treadmill. So I've been burning the treadmill up over there for my steps.
No, the old treadmill.
Better than the snow. I hate the cold.
Yeah, that's fair.
I'm with you. I go in my basement too on the treadmill. And
yep.
I used to be a cold outdoorsy walker. Now I'm like, I don't fucking have time for this.
No.
It's time to put a hat and gloves on, okay?
I just want to be free. I don't have to wear layers.
Right, exactly.
So Chase, how about you give us a little introduction for yourself so everybody listening knows who the hell you are and what you do?
Yeah. So basically, I try to keep this short as I can. I feel like it keeps adding on more and more. But I am Chase Smith. Like I said, I grew up in Virginia my entire life and pretty much dealt with my weight being an issue ever since childhood. Was always the heavier kid and continued, growing up into teenage years, continued to put on the weight. Tried dieting, I don't know, probably when I was like 13 or so, if not maybe even sooner. But my relationship with food has always been garbage. I mean, even to the point where I remember I didn't really put the two and two together until later on, once I was a coach and started realizing oh, that's not very good behaviors. Even just hoarding Halloween candy when I was a young kid and binging on it in secrecy, basically. So those things started at a very young age and continued just to have a really unhealthy relationship with food and put on the weight every year, try to go diet every single year. Every New Year's resolution was this is the year every single year. And I would just usually lose 20, 30, maybe 40 pounds, hit a quote unquote plateau. And I just the heck with it because I hated the diet anyways. So what was the point in continuing? And then lastly, in 2019, I was at my heaviest weight at 382. It was that point where a friend and coworker at the time was like, hey, I want to lose weight. I know you want to lose weight. Let's do a weight loss challenge and see who can lose the most weight. So I was just like, sure, why not? Like, it'd be great. We started that. And shortly into it, we were both seeing success. I was losing more than her just because I had way more to lose than she did. And so we're like, let's kind of just ditch the challenge because I honestly didn't want her to feel like she was losing, quote unquote, if she wasn't losing as much as I was. We ditched the challenge and we just continued to push each other. And from there, it just continued to, I was seeing a lot of success, really putting all the work in, nutrition, going to the gym. And I met a nutrition coach back in April 2019. Ended up not hiring him at that moment, but he brought me into his Facebook community. And so really just learning from him and everything like that. Hired him in August. That year I had lost over 100 pounds, was feeling great, loved every bit of it. And just into I'll kind of fast forward 2020, continued to go through like weight loss cycles, also focus on maintenance as well. 2021 was like the year I really started to double down on my training. I hired a different coach who also did personal training as well and started getting workouts from him. And then fast forward to 2021, I'm travel nursing for a while. Actually went through a relapse in my binge eating during that time as well. So I had to work through a lot of that. And then 2022, I got into powerlifting after a good close friend of mine won national championships. So that really inspired me to try something new and really push towards other goals. And so then I'm doing that now. And I have a meet coming up in like 6.5 weeks.
That's amazing. I'm excited for you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm really excited as well.
That is super exciting. So I want to go back to when you were 13, if you don't mind, right? How did you start to think about like wanting to lose weight and your relationship with food? Like, how did that all start, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah. So, I mean, I remember, gosh, like both my parents are, I don't want to say they were like unsupportive. They were both like supportive and they just probably didn't know like how to, like they both had slight weight issues themselves, but they were supportive, but I guess they just don't know how to really like, how do you help your child lose weight? Like, right. Not everybody like really like understands that completely to a healthy way. And not that they ever mean to do any harm or anything like that, but they don't know the best. So like, of course things are coming up, hey, you just start really focusing on your weight. You just, start eating a little better, getting some movement in, go out and go for a walk, go for a run, whatever, like just kind of like some commentary here and there. I even remember when I was probably like, oh gosh, maybe 14, 15. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it's weird how there's like one memory sticks in my head. Mm-hmm. My grandmother, God rest her soul, she made this comment when she was hemming my jeans because I have no legs. And so I had to get my jeans hemmed by her. Mm-hmm. She made a comment once. She was like, this is a lot of fabric. Mm-hmm. Totally not mean any harm. Mm-hmm. But of course, to me, it really kind of hit a little deep there. And so that was all around that same time when I was just starting to really notice, like, I need to get healthier and do better. The first diet I really remember doing was my mom had ordered some Nutrisystem meals for herself. And to me, 13, 14-ish years old, whatever it was, I was like, oh, so you eat these meals and you lose weight. Like that, like there was no correlation like what they meant. It was just like, these are some special meals. You saw the commercials on TV, like this person ate Nutrisystem lost, 100 pounds, whatever it was. And it's like, to me, it was like, all right, I'm going to eat this food and I'll lose weight. That's one of the first memories that I had of like my first dieting experience. And then just continued to like kind of dabble in other sorts of diets, Weight Watchers, Atkins diet, Slim Fast shakes, all the things throughout the next couple of years.
Okay. Yeah. That's as a young child, that's a lot to handle, especially when you're going through like puberty and all that kind of stuff,
It's a confusing time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you mentioned binge eating. I don't think we've ever talked about binge eating on this podcast. And when did that start for you?
I didn't really notice to its fullest extent. So I was probably about 15 or 16, which I'll cover in a second. But like I mentioned, now that I look back, I think even when I was a child with the Halloween candy stuff that I was telling you about, like, I think it was even like back then, I was really binging and just never really recognized what it was. But then I did not make this connection until a couple of years ago when I relapsed, about like when I put two and two together. But it's weird how like, and I've never like, and I'm actually starting to go to therapy. And next week I'm starting back with a therapist to start kind of work on some other things as well. But for some reason, like the connection of freedom. And what I mean by that is when I was turned 15 and got my learner's permit, then my license, around that time, that was also when I realized like, hey, I'm out and about. No one knows what I'm doing. Nobody can see what the food I'm eating. I can go through the drive-through. I can stop at the gas station and get junk food, candy bars, whatever it be, soda. No one will ever know. I'll dispose of the evidence, and it just never happened. Mm-hmm. And that was like when I first started to notice this like downward spiral into binge eating and just not having a very really healthy relationship with food at all. When I realized that, it was because back in 2021, like I mentioned, I started travel nursing. And again, here I had freedom. Mm-hmm. I was living by myself. I've been living with my mom for a while. We owned a house together. And when I moved out to go travel nurse, I had my place to myself, and that was there again. And I was also in a brand new area with brand new restaurants. I don't know if either of you have been to Charleston, South Carolina, but restaurant capital of the world, like all the amazing food out there. But that was my first assignment there. And, everyone, when you ask somebody, hey, what do I do here? Oh, the food. And so I'm going out trying all the places. And next thing you know, I'm back in a binge restrict cycle again. But that's probably the biggest trigger that I've noticed from that.
So how did you become aware of that? Were you knowing that it was happening when it was happening, or?
So when the first time around when I was like 15 or 16, I just knew I had a bad relationship with food. I didn't really know like what binging was or at the moment. And so when I went through it in 2021, I definitely knew it was, because when I started my journey in 2019, I was doing really well. Like I had a couple slip ups here or there, but it was nothing consistent, like actually going back into full on binging, like on a routine basis again. Mm-hmm. And so when this happened again, initially I seeked out therapy to start kind of working through, figure out what's going on there, to talk through some of those things. Didn't have a great experience. That's just because of my travel nursing, and you have to find someone in the state, and you're moving, you have to change therapists, all that jibber jabber. I think it's crazy how complicated they make it, but so that didn't work out great for me. But then actually during that time, in conjunction with my regular nutrition and fitness coach, I hired a binge eating coach during that time as well for a short period, and found that really helpful just to work through some different exercises and things that she helped me with. I also, and it's from the company, I actually read the book. It's called The Binge Code. I don't know if either of you have heard of that book, but it's a phenomenal book. Would highly recommend for anybody struggling with binge eating. It's one of those books I definitely read, and I was like, man, I feel like they wrote this book about me. Like everything that they talk about is spot on. But I hired one of their coaches through their coaching services they provide, and really helped me get through a lot of that. And, even to this day, like I still have my times when it comes up here and there. I was always a stress eater, emotional eater. And so just sometimes like, old brain likes to be happy and go back to those old habits. So it's something I continue to even work on to this day sometimes.
There we go. I just looked up the binge code too. Learn about this one a little bit here. I like that.
I've heard of Brain Over Binge, which I've listened to actually audiobook, and she has a podcast. Okay. And I learned a lot from that one. But you were talking about like your relationship with food, right? When did that start, like having a bad relationship with food? Did your parents talk about like food, this is bad, this is good, you shouldn't have any more of that kind of thing?
Yes and no. I mean, not to the extent where like, I'm sure, we've all heard like the really, unfortunate stories of like parents who really talk about, bad versus good foods and don't allow things or restrict a lot. I didn't have a lot of that, honestly. My parents allowed anything really to be in the house. I mean, like they wouldn't like purposely buy a lot of junk, but, we also had like, how we talk about keeping food out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. Well, we used to have what's called the snack basket. Well, that used to sit on the counter, and that was like your go-to. Like if you were hungry, you wanted a snack, you go to the snack basket. And that was something we had growing up. And, it was one of those things where, I may be eating something and one of them would like make a comment like, didn't you already have one of those? Or, do you really want another one? So again, like nothing really in depth, but like definitely had a little bit of that growing up for sure.
Sure. Yeah. I remember we had a snack drawer growing up, especially at my grandma's house. It was always loaded with goodies.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. We have a lot of snacks. We don't really have a snack drawer, but it's funny, like, how the things that you remember, Chase, because now I'm like thinking about what I say to my little boy, right? Who was 11. And I really try to watch my language because, my mother, the same thing she was always on a diet, always talked about food. She was like the good food, bad food police. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We grew up with like tofu pups and shit. So I've noticed like, he'll grab another snack or third. And I'm like, okay, do you really think you need another one? Are you really actually hungry? But to me, I'm like, you're not even hungry. Like you should listen to your hunger cues. But now I'm like, okay, maybe I should second guess, like even saying that.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with that a lot. And actually I have a 7-year-old niece, and even like going back home around Christmas time, and it was just little things that we had her for about a week when I was there, my mom and I, and just little things she would say like here, there. I'm like, ooh, like, like I know she means nothing by it, but it's like, you're definitely right. Now that you know this stuff, it's like you catch yourself.
Yep.
Like, we don't eat that kind of food. And I'm like, like, let's be careful how we word those things.
Yeah, because these are all just learned behaviors, and we inherit them from our parents who inherited them from their parents. And like the site, and then, with our generation, especially, like the cycle starting to stop more and more, thankfully. But it's hard.
Yeah.
I've been guilty of that too, with the whole, before I became a coach and started learning about this stuff myself with my own son, Beth, like, oh, you can't have dessert because you weren't hungry for dinner, things like that. It's like, okay, time to back off of that,
Right. And it's like, okay, what do I say?
Yeah.
How do I get him to understand and listen to his body? Like, you don't really need
like, you can't just eat snacks all day, right? Like,
you know what I mean? You need to have a meal.
Yeah.
But then he'll go straight to the dessert. And in my mind, like, of course he can have the dessert, right? I don't ever, nothing's off limits, but it's like, okay, do you really need that?
It's like, I'd rather you have some whole foods with your dessert. Like, not saying that to our child, but like, I always have, it's not a rule, but it's something I do with my son is like, can you at least try the food that we're making and try the food that we have? If you don't like it, cool, that's fair. Not going to ask you to try it again. Because, kids, they're picky eaters. And a lot of the times he's like, you know what, Dad, I actually did like that. I'm like, oh, all right, great. We're going to add this to the mental list of things that you like, so I can make these more. But it's always like the highly processed foods too, right? Like, he loves chicken patties. I fucking love chicken patties too, and things like that. We're never going to restrict those things.
It's like, he's allowed to have whatever he wants, but at what point do I let him have as much as he wants?
Right.
Like, it's tough as a parent to try to really, let him be okay with eating whatever he wants, but also making sure that he doesn't fucking go overboard because, kids and sugar will do that.
Yeah. I think it's just leading by example, honestly.
Exactly.
So how we talk to ourselves matters. And this is something we talk with our clients, right? Like, talking about changing your body in front of your kids, especially for people that have daughters. I know that my female clients were like, my mom was always talking about her body and trying to lose weight. And I remember those things. And that's, now that looking back at it, that had an impact on me. She didn't do it intentionally. She didn't know better, just like you said earlier, but it still happened. So, like, oh, I'm satisfied. I don't need this second piece of whatever this dessert is because I'm satisfied. I think that's kind of a good way of doing it, perhaps.
Definitely. Yeah. That's one thing I do a lot with whenever I'm with my niece. It's just definitely like leading by, behavior, like leading by example of, I'm eating a lot of this food right now. And then, I'm going to have that later. I want to have that, but first I want to fill up on some of this good stuff. It's gonna make me feel really good.
There you go.
Or even like, eating these foods, make you strong, and like, whatever it is you may word it, like, make whatever connects to their head and makes them, think about, not trying to like say they're necessarily good foods, but just really promoting that these are going to help you more than the other foods will help you.
Yeah. Right. Make you feel good, make you feel strong. You're going to feel
exactly.
My son is at the age where he's like thinking about muscle and stuff.
Yes. I was just going to say that with my son. Beth.
Like, did you get your protein in to make sure you build muscle? I'm like, show me your bicep. He's like, oh, now he's like telling me how much protein is in certain. I think it's pretty cool.
Love it.
I didn't even know what protein was at his age. I don't know about you guys, but
I doubt it. I mean, I was drinking Mountain Dew and eating potato chips all day when I was 13. So
about macronutrients.
And that continued into my early 20s, 2 liter of Mountain Dew every day and a bag of Doritos, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly, I didn't even know about, and I think it's another thing that I just love to always chat with people about is like how much of the stuff we really don't learn, or maybe we've learned, but we just didn't really even like comprehend or understand what it means. Because even like I'm a nurse. And so like I went through a whole semester of a nutrition course, which is funny because I actually hated it, funny enough. And now I'm a nutrition coach. But at that time, I could have cared 2 cents about, what actually nutrition was and like why it was important. And, of course, they also go over like into the really sciencey stuff in the course itself. But like it's during that time, I didn't value what that information meant to me. And that's also when I didn't care about my health as well. Because I've had people before be like, well, you're a nurse, you should know like about this stuff. And I'm like, sure, I'm good at applying it to other people, but I never used it for myself.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely interesting. I think people don't really realize like you can see all the information out in the world that you want to. Like, I mean, people, look at any of our Instagrams or Facebook, whatever, like that, all the information we're putting out. But until you actually learn how to apply that information and use it for yourself, you're never going to do anything with it.
Yeah. And that's where us coaches come into play. Like we literally give so much stuff out there. Like, please take all this information. And if you struggle with applying it to yourself, that's like, then we can talk, like we'll help you apply it. We'll come up with a strategy, a game plan, and and a roadmap, and we'll get you there. Yeah. Like the X's and O's and things like that. Like we know what to do, but why the hell aren't we doing it? That's what matters.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And going back to what we were talking about with kids and just eating whatever they want, like kids and even into our teens and early 20s, we can literally eat potato chips all day and feel phenomenal. Like literally Mountain Dew, potato chips all day, and those kids are going to be feeling great. And I know that because I've done that, but it definitely starts catching up with us later in life. So it really just shows the importance of trying to instill those good behaviors around food and the relationship with food when we're younger. Yeah. It takes a community too, because kids aren't with us all day. So we can't supervise our kids all day. So like it needs to be happening in the schools. And I know like what pisses me off, like my son's lunch balance ran out the other day. So I have it so that it automatically applies like $50 whenever it gets like below $5 or something. But for some reason it expired at the end of the calendar year. Nobody told me. So he didn't have money for lunch the other day when he went back to school. And they gave him fucking peanut butter and jelly sandwich. They said, no, you're not allowed to eat because you don't have money in your account. And that really pissed me off. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Wow. You couldn't even tell me, give me a warning that his lunch account had no money in it, like been charging $50 every 2 weeks automatically. You don't think there's a reason why it fucking stopped? And now you're going to tell my son he can't have the chicken and vegetables that you're having with school lunch, and you're going to give him a fucking peanut butter and jelly sandwich? Like, come on. It starts with the schools too.
Yeah. I mean, like they could even like given him that food and been like, and like send a note with him or contact you. I don't
charge
know
it. Like tell me I owe my son
exactly
for lunch and we'll pay it.
And sure. Okay. Maybe if you've gone like a week and not paid it. Okay. Then maybe you go to the peanut butter and jelly. Again, not saying I agree with that, but like, okay. Like, but the first time, come on, like that's ridiculous.
Yeah. And so I know, I also know as a child growing up, I received free lunches for many years. And I definitely felt the shame with that. And then we moved up to 40-cent lunches is what it was. And then we really started, we had it made because we started paying full price when we got into high school because our parents were doing better. But there's a lot of shame that's involved in kids in school too, with food and our financial, social status and things like that. And that all impacts our relationship with food too.
Mm-hmm. It's just all this little stuff that people just don't think about. But I think it's also one of the coolest things to like, I know like when I start working with a client, I'm sure you guys could agree with this as well. It's always really interesting to start digging into that stuff at a little bit deeper level. And then you start seeing all those like connections start snapping off in their head. And like, that's where that came from. That's where that came from. And like all these little things, totally. Like, I that's why I encourage people all the time, like have someone to talk to, whether it is a coach, a mentor, maybe it's a best friend that you actually feel comfortable talking about these things with. Maybe it is a therapist, whoever it is that you want to talk to. Like a lot of times, all of these behaviors are learned. And so we have to learn where they're actually coming from. And so that's one of my favorite things to do with clients now. You should dig deeper and figure out where that stuff's coming from.
Yeah, because kids are naturally intuitive eaters, and then us adults go and fuck that up for them, honestly, or society fucks it up for them, and then we're striving to get back to what we were as kids, which is eating intuitively, mindfully, and eating when we're hungry and not eating when we're not. We fuck it up ourselves as adults for our own kids.
Mm-hmm. Now, with like binge eating. Is that kind of like a learned behavior that becomes like just a really bad habit? Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Like habits can be really hard to break, and you have to replace them rather than you can't break a habit. You replace the habit. So with binge eating, how does one get out of that?
So I think, first I always, and this is actually something, I'll give credit where credit's due. I know you guys have had Jared Hamilton on the show. This is something I learned from him and I've continued to carry forward in my own life and also with my clients as well. And when it comes to binge eating, you really first have to figure out why you're binge eating. Because it usually comes down to like one of four or even multiple of the four big reasons why it's happening. Two of them are like pretty easy to control and like fix, and two of them are a little more complicated. Two of the easier ones to fix is one, you're probably not allowing yourself certain food groups or you're restricting certain types of foods. If you're someone who never allows yourself to have carbs, or let's use cookies, for example. You say you're never allowed to have cookies, and then you finally do get access to, a plate of cookies. You go, dive headfirst into that entire plate, eat the whole thing because you've restricted yourself for so long from them. So restriction could be the first one, or you're just not eating enough, period. If you're eating 1,000, 1,200 calories every single day and you're restricting yourself, like, sure, anybody can do that for a certain amount of time, but at some point you're going to burst. Like, I love using the analogy of like, imagine like, when you're swimming when you're a kid, you have the beach ball and you shove it under the water and you're trying to hold it under the water as long as you can, keep it down there, and eventually it just blows out, from underneath of you out of the water. Yeah. That's eventually what's going to happen with your food as well. Mm-hmm. So you can only control that for so long. And then the more complex ones are, one, maybe it's your identity piece. If you are someone who identifies as a binge eater, and I had a consultation call with someone who really had, was going through a lot of this a couple weeks ago. She basically said, I've been a binge eater my entire life. I binge. I'm a binge eater. Like, that's basically like a label she has slapped on herself for her entire life. And so a lot of that's going to take, doing that inner work of figuring out, a new identity and starting to prove yourself that you're not a binge eater, by, stacking those wins, building momentum, and starting to prove to your old self that's no longer who you are. So it could be that identity piece, or it comes down to emotionally tied. A lot of people, they find themselves, whatever emotion they may, let's be honest. Like, I think, I hate when people say food is just fuel. Like, that's garbage. I feel like that's something that, a lot of us can probably agree on. Like, that food is a lot more than just fuel. It's pleasure.
It's one thing that it is, but it's also many more things than that.
Exactly. And so, like, a lot of people are eating for any emotion out there. We eat when we're sad. We eat when you're, anxious or frustrated or mad, or even when we're happy. I mean, think about all the events you go to, weddings and parties, anything like that. It's always a lot of times just centered around food. So we've been so conditioned to that. So now a lot of times when we're emotionally driven, anytime we have an emotion, we turn right to food, and we're just trying to numb that emotion with something. And we know that, we're going to get that dopamine hit when we have, the cookies or whatever it may be that you like to eat. And that's going to solve, quote unquote, for those who can't see me, it'll numb those emotions temporarily, but we're not really addressing why those emotions are occurring. So first, we have to identify where this binge eating is coming from, which of those 4 reasons. Once we have awareness of where it's coming from, then we can start to dive in a little bit deeper and figure out how we can address that. And it's not an easy black or white thing. It's not something that's going to be fixed overnight. Beth, to kind of go back to what you were saying about in the beginning about, where it's almost like a learned behavior into a habit. I don't necessarily know if it's always learned, because I will say personally, and others, yes, it could be learned. I know personally speaking for myself, I never really observed binge eating when I was growing up, when I started doing this. So it was more just out of like, I'm sure it was either, just trying to numb an emotion, in growing up, I won't go to all the details, but, I'm sure that's where mine was kind of driven towards, like emotions. My brother, just had a, difficult life growing up with some different things with troubles and such. Parents were divorced when I was like 5. So like a lot of those things going on. I feel like I definitely probably leaned a little bit more in towards like the emotional eating piece. And that's where it ended up turning into that binge, because I was getting that dopamine hit every time. And it was like, that feels good. I can control that food. And maybe I can't control all the stressors that are going on in my life right now, but I know I can eat those Oreos and feel amazing in the moment.
Yeah.
And so I think that's when it turns into a habit, because it's like you start ingraining in yourself basically, hey, negative emotion, Oreos, happy. And it's just like, and before you start realizing what detriment that's now causing to your body later on in life, that's when it's become such a strong habit that it's now, habitual basically.
Yeah. So essentially it's a response.
Eating causes a parasympathetic response. It actually calms you down. So if you have a lot of stress, if you're super emotional and things, that's why people turn to food.
The act of chewing.
That reason.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And which is another reason why like chewing your food and eating mindfully and slowing down is so beneficial, because it helps to manage your fight or flight response and your cortisol and things like that. Literally, there's research showing that chewing helps to make us feel better, which, chewing gum, whatever, the act of chewing, which is like why you don't feel satisfied when you eat protein or drink protein shakes or smoothies and things like that, because you're not chewing the food. It's just going straight down the hatch.
And I think it's important for people to know that when someone just says, I binge, okay, what exactly does that mean? Because there's different.
Yes.
Right. Do you want to
go? Like binging is not overeating. Like there's two totally different things.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. And I think that's something a lot of people definitely label it. It's easy to start throwing these labels on ourselves when these things come up. And you can definitely overeat without binging, so to speak.
Totally.
Like a lot of times the easiest way I like to explain it to clients when I'm talking and have this conversation is like, basically like binging is like, think about like when you are eating so much food that you get to this point where it's like, it's almost like you like lose that sense of control. Basically is the easiest way I can usually describe with people is like you've gone to that point where like you're eating just because, like, it's just, you got to this point and it's almost like you can't pump the brakes. You can't turn around. You're just in this full-fledged until basically the Oreo package is empty, basically, until you have that physical barrier to cut you off. And so I think that's something that's really important to differentiate. And overeating can sometimes lead into binge eating eventually if it becomes if you add in that habitual piece into that and start losing that control, or, maybe it's like, how many times as somebody, if you hear somebody say, I ate that carton of ice cream until I basically almost got sick. My stomach hurt. I wasn't even feeling good. Didn't really want to keep eating, but I just kept eating it just because. That's when we're leaning more towards like the binging side. If we have a day where it's just like, like work was awful today, I'm just going to eat this carton of ice cream and call it a day. That's more like overeating, because like you're
mindfully choosing that. You're like, I'm just like, fuck it, I'm going to eat all this pizza and like move on with my day type thing.
Exactly. It's just when you lose that sense of control, I think is the biggest thing to differentiate the two.
Is it true that it's almost like an out of body experience? Like you kind of, at some point, you don't really know that it's happening. You're just doing it. You're not really there. Am I making sense?
Yeah, no, you are making sense. And I think that I would agree with that. I think it's, to different degrees for everybody, I would believe. But I mean, I definitely back in, when I've had binge eating struggles before, I get that. I think that's kind of where it ties back a little bit into, when you hear people talk about mindless eating and you think about like when you're, you got the bag of chips and you're sitting there, just you're frustrated, whatever emotions are going on, you're just eating that bag of chips, eating. And next thing you know, you look down, you're like, holy shit, bag of chips is gone.
Whoops. Yeah.
And so it's like you said, like you're just not even really thinking and comprehending what you're currently doing. You're just constantly eating.
Yeah, mindless eating. Yeah, that's a good one, because mindless eating can happen for many, many different reasons. But it all comes back to the awareness too, like building that awareness and that connection with your body. If we can get control of that and get aware of our feelings and our emotions and our stressors, like that is truly the key.
Yeah. And I guess, I'd love to, give a little bit of like tactical information for those who are listening with it, maybe struggle with something like that.
Yeah.
A couple of things that have been helpful for me and I still use with, a lot of people that I talk to about binge eating is this first technique was something that I actually learned from the Binge Code book, and then my coach was using a little as well. What's called the Zen 10 technique. Zen 10.
Zen 10. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And basically what that means is like, let's say I get home from work and I have had a really crazy day, boss of the dick, and was tired of the entire day. And I'm ready just to like dive headfirst into the bag of chips. Well, I'm going to give myself 10 minutes. I'm going to say Zen 10. And it's a little more powerful when, as we know, if you say things out loud, it has a little more meaning to it. So if you're able to say it out loud to yourself, Zen 10, or if you're around other people, you can say it in your head if you'd like, but say Zen 10. And then that gives yourself that moment for 10 minutes without doing anything. And when I say doing anything, I'm not talking about like just other things. I'm talking about with the food. And also during that 10 minutes is removing yourself from the room where the food is at. Don't say Zen 10 and stare at the bag of chips in the pantry for 10 minutes. Yeah. Walk away, get out of the kitchen. If it's like at work and you're in the break room, get out of the break room, wherever it may be, just say Zen 10 and get out and remove yourself from that. And then find a distraction, whether it's walking or maybe going to listen to music, do some meditation, some breath work. Maybe it's, going to clean up around the house, whatever it is that you want to distract yourself with for those 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. And even if you have to physically set a 10-minute alarm for yourself. And then at the end of that 10 minutes, you have, usually 3 different options. One, you're like, you know what? Actually, I'm good. That was emotionally driven. I've worked through that. I'm actually going to have a structured meal now and actually, nourish my body and feel better about this. Mm-hmm. Or 2, maybe you're like, you know what? I still want those bag of chips and I'm not too sure yet. Give yourself 10 more minutes. Or maybe you're like, you know what? I do want the chips, but now I'm in a better headspace because I've thought about this and I've caught this like urge to binge into all these chips. I'm going to get a single serving out of this bag of chips here and put this on the plate and have a single serving to cut me off.
I like that. Putting it on the plate. That's a really powerful move right there.
Yes.
Don't just eat directly out of the bag. That's one thing that we teach with our clients. Like that's when you're going to eat the whole bag.
Yes, exactly. So get it out, put it on a plate, or even if it means like buying the individual serving size bags, I think those are a great tool for a lot of people. So that's the Zen 10 technique, basically just allowing yourself that space and that time to really work through those emotions that are currently going on in your head. And I'm not saying, some people are probably like, oh yeah, that's easier. Yeah, it is easier said than done. Are there going to be times when you get home and you dive into the chips and you're like, oh, forgot that Zen 10? Yeah. Yeah. There's going to be those times that happens. And that's okay though. It's putting in those reps and showing yourself that, eventually you are going to start breaking that pattern a little bit more.
Yeah.
Another thing to help with the awareness, and it's just creating some sort of boundary for yourself. I mentioned earlier, like the concept of out of sight, out of mind. And that's another thing I encourage a lot of people to do is like, if like, let's say, going back to the chips example, let's say if chips are your food that you find yourself always leaning into and binging and mindless eating, then don't put them first thing in the pantry. When you open up the pantry, when you get home, that's the first thing you see. How about we put them up like on the top shelf somewhere in the back of the pantry where you don't have to even see them. Like you have to actually physically think about them before you want them. Mm-hmm. And then, I always jokingly tell people, like the random like cabinet doors a lot of people have above their fridge that no one can reach till you get a chair or something.
Your fire extinguisher's up there.
Yeah, exactly. Or whatever it may be.
Tell me it's not up there.
Fucking great place for an emergency. Gee.
Yeah. Hold on fire.
Let me get my chair to get this fucking fire extinguisher.
But like I always say, like think about it, you put it up there, and that way, like in the moment when you're like wanting these chips and maybe you're angry or depressed or whatever it is, the emotion you're trying to feed in that moment. Now you have to physically go get the chair, drag it into the kitchen, get up on the chair, reach up and grab it out of the pantry. You have to do all these steps, and this allows yourself more time to think.
I agree. That's really powerful. Like taking the snack drawer or the snacks that are on the counter, putting those in the pantry, and then putting your healthy snacks like the fruits and things like that. Put those on the cupboard and in plain view, because if it's out of sight, like you said, it's for the most part, it's out of mind. And it does, if you do want it, cool. You're going to be thinking more about it because you have to go through those extra steps. Totally.
Yep. And you might get to that, third or fourth step and then be like, wait, why am I doing this?
Do I really want this? Yeah.
Do I really want this?
Yep. So that was Zen 10?
Zen 10.
Zen 10. Yeah, I was
like
looking it up really quickly there. I couldn't find it, but because there's a similar technique that we use in mindful eating, and this is what we teach too. This is a very basic mindful eating concept. It's called the stop skill. So essentially with mindful eating, we're saying you can eat that food, whatever the food is, but we're going to do it mindfully. So we do that. So STOP is just an acronym for select, taste, observe, and pause. And so we're going to do this with our first 4 bites of the food. So we're going to choose the food. We're going to be very mindful and selective of it. Is this the right food for me in this moment? Is this what I want? Is this going to treat my body well? So we notice all the colors, textures, and things like that. Then we go on from there. Then we taste it with those first 4 bites. We don't just inhale it, right? We take our time tasting it. Then we observe. So we observe like what's happening around us while we're eating those foods. We observe our emotional state, our mental state. And then we pause, like when we're eating it too. Before we swallow, we pause and we think about these things all over again. And that sounds very similar to that Zen 10 technique. And I really like that.
And that might be just something from the binge code. That's why I don't know if it might be a little bit harder to find because it might just be from them. I know I read it in the book, and then my binge coach brought it up about that.
Okay. And then I want to get this book.
Yeah, it's really good. Like I said, it really identifies all the reasons that like people a lot of times will struggle with binge eating. And then like one last little tip I like to always share, like another way to create that moment to allow yourself to think is I always like to tell people like get a little like fridge magnet, like say, or something like that just reminds you of like just giving yourself a moment to think. If you find yourself going to the fridge often, to binge or whatever it may be, or mindlessly eating. Maybe you get like, I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's a unicorn, a rainbow, a fairy. I don't care what it is. Just something that what that means to yourself. No one else in the family has to know why the magnet's on the fridge, but you yourself know that when you go to the fridge, you're going to see that fairy and you're like, wait a second.
That's my mindful eating fairy.
Yes, exactly. And so like have that, or it's like, it could be a sticky note somewhere in the kitchen or whatever it may be. And like, for example, a practical example, what I did is when I struggled a lot with my binge eating back in 2021, it was when I was getting off of work from nursing, long stressful day, 12-hour shifts. Most of the time wouldn't even get lunch during it because it's so busy and short staffed and all those things. So I'd get off and I'd be like, just all the emotions. I was upset. I was frustrated. I was sad, depressed, all the things. And so I'd get off work and I would just want that instant dopamine hit. And so I would just swing into a store or a restaurant or whatever, like just grab some junk, whatever it may be. And that was giving me that dopamine hit when I wasn't really handling my emotions well during that time. And so what I did is I took a little sticky note and I put it on the dash of my car. And no one's ever really in my car. So, I mean, I didn't have to worry about anyone else seeing it and asking what it was, but it said, think long-term. And it just gave me that quick little moment just to think to myself, why, like, what's going on right now? Like, let's actually think through my emotions. Yes, you had a long, stressful day. You're hungry. You don't want the chips. You don't want the brownies. You're hungry. You just want food. You haven't eaten since 5 o'clock that morning when you had breakfast. You're just hungry. So get home because you know you have food in the ready, prepped and ready to go for you. You just have to get there and eat it. And so that was just enough just to make me snap, think about it for a second, and then go home.
I like that.
So just find something and put it where, identify, again, this is where like just being really aware and knowing where these times are coming up for yourself. When you find yourself overeating or binge eating, identify when that's happening and figure out how you can create some sort of awareness in the moment when that happens.
That pause, that pause is very important.
It really is. Yeah. I love that. So moving away from the binge discussion, I'm really curious. How did you go from being a registered nurse in nursing and being a travel nurse? What made you get into, start chasing health and start helping other people?
Yeah. So I actually, so after my own weight loss journey and it's, after I lost a good bit of weight, everyone was asking, how'd you do it? How'd you do it? At the very beginning. And so I was just helping a lot of people just getting started, kind of telling them what I was doing, sharing my own story and like how I did what I did and helping people with their calories and things like that. And then, that's when my coach at the time was like, hey, like you just maybe think about doing this, like and actually helping some people, like and actually doing this like legit.
Nice.
Instead of just kind of being a friend on the side, basically. And that's when I went and got my certification for nutrition coaching in June of 2020 and started my own business. And it was more just a side gig for a while. And as I was doing more nursing and continuing to grow my business, I'd had like thoughts of like wanting to do this like full time. And I wasn't sure if it would be really possible or how I'd be able to grow it, to the point where it could be a full-time business. And eventually, after going, talking with some business mentors and such, I eventually came to the conclusion like, all right, I can do this. It's going to take, some strategy, but we're able to do that. But besides the business point in itself, I always like to point out the main reason why I wanted to do this was I almost look at it as like, we're not practicing medicine, but I always compare it to preventative medicine, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
And actually it's funny. I just read a blog article about this the other day along the same lines was, I called it like catching you before you're on the hospital stretcher in front of me, basically, because I remember so many times after I was already a coach and I worked in the ER during this time. And there were so many times where patients would come in for whatever it may be, and besides like the traumas and things like that, but like the things like, like due to like chronic illnesses, basically
lifestyle stuff.
Exactly. Like they'd be in front of me. I'm just thinking, and just I had this like little thing in the back of my head being like, what if somebody was there for you 10, 20 years ago to stop you in that moment and steer you in that other direction? And so I was like, man, like I love being able to be that person to help that person earlier on before they get to that point. Yeah. And so that was like when it was more towards like my mission to like, I want to be that person that helps people before that happens. Or even if they already are kind of heading down that road, how can we get them turned around and back on the right road? And so that's basically when I started to like, all right, this is going to be a full-time thing for me. And as a nurse, you can help a lot of people, but I can help so many more people as a coach because I'm not as limited. When I'm a nurse, I'm helping, those couple of patients that I have that day. And as a coach, I'm building up a team of clients with, I have an assistant coach now. So like, it's just continuing to be able to spread even like my Facebook community and things like that. Like I'm able to help so many more people and it's so much more rewarding in this aspect. And not to mention, I want to go down the rabbit hole, but nursing burnout was getting pretty real too. So
can imagine, especially when you were doing it.
Yeah,
in the last few years.
I imagine like 2021, 2020, it was pretty emotionally hard being in the health industry.
Yeah. And it's funny. I actually, so I was working, my first nursing job was nursing home, working for a couple months, but then I went to psych nursing and I worked at a state psychiatric hospital for about 3.5 years. And then at the end of 2019, I pivoted to emergency nursing and literally just like, I got off orientation probably like January, February of 2020. And it was like, boom, here's a pandemic for you to handle now too. So my ER nursing job became very hectic and very different from when I started just a couple months prior. But yeah, definitely a lot of emotions and things at both as a nurse and as a patient, of course, from both sides of it.
Yeah.
So what kind of clients do you like to work with?
I like to, I'm not saying like that, exactly like me, because I feel like, and I would say I work primarily with women, but I like to look at, those who have to lose a lot of weight, kind of like where I was back on my day one. A lot of the clients that we work with have 50, 75, sometimes even over 100, 150 pounds to lose, and have, a lot of either, emotional eating struggles, maybe some binge eating struggles. I always tell people, we have to have those under control at some sort, whether through therapy or something like that, because there's a lot of scope. Mm-hmm. But I love helping those kind of people because it's where I used to be at. And I feel like a lot of those people have been down the same road that we just talked about, like the years and years and years of all the different types of diets, and just feel like nothing works for them. And they just want that quality of life back. And so that's who I love working with now.
Well, truly a lifestyle change. I love that. Yep.
Yeah. Chase is going to help a lot of people.
Hell yeah. I love the content you put out there. You're a good writer too. I really, that's what it's always caught my eye about you, especially being friends on Facebook. You put out a lot of good content out there.
Thank you. I've been trying to get better at the writing. I've been actually taking a little bit of a shift on my focus more towards longer style writing. Like I said, I just put out my first blog article last week, just like
awesome.
Trying to get more towards the long form writing. I just feel like it just, I don't know. I love the video thing. Don't get me wrong. And I was dabbling in the TikTok stuff and I still am, but like, it's just, I've found it a lot easier to connect with people when you're not stuck with a 30-second video. And
you can't write out. There's no context. You can't you can't build that connection. I'm right there with you, man. I'm so against, like, not against videos and things like that, but I just don't want to make video content right now. So I'm doing the writing and things like that too.
Okay. I'm glad I'm not the only one. I just I'm
right there with you, man.
I don't know. I built an audience on TikTok, and it's just like, I felt like everything's just so superficial there. And it's like, you're just like begging for people to watch you for like, half a second to catch their attention. And I don't know. I feel like the kind of person I'm going to work with is actually willing to sit down and read a 5-10 minute long article rather
than invested
just,
in it.
Exactly. And that's the people who I want to help. They're actually ready to make that change and not looking for just the next quick fix. Because honestly, my thing is, if you're expecting to learn everything you know about dieting from a 30-second TikTok,
yeah,
I don't know.
I just I agree. Like, I don't want to make another 5 tips to lose fat video ever again in my life. I'm sure I will at some point.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that's how I got started. I mean, TikTok was great for that. I know. So I'm not saying this to like shit on TikTok, because obviously that's how Beth and I got started.
Yeah.
But it was great for building, I guess, a community. And the community can't just be on TikTok though, because there's no longevity there.
Exactly.
We have the fucking attention span of a gnat on that app, 5 seconds. So, and then you lose them.
Exactly. So that's where I've taken that pivot here lately. It's just trying to get to more long form and really just getting into the podcasting a lot more and just really enjoying that part of it. And we'll see where it goes. I feel like it's always changing every day.
Right.
Now, but
Right.
Yeah, you've got to be able to adapt quickly in this industry.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Really quickly, I'm curious, when's the powerlifting meet?
Yeah.
March 11th.
Dude, that is like within the few days of when I did my first powerlifting meet last year.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So because I went and visited Beth like the day after, the second day after that. So I did my first one last year. Is it local to you?
It's closer to Detroit, so it's about like 2.5 hours away from me. But
March 11th. Do you have a support squad coming out to see you?
I was gonna say, Matt, go.
I mean, Detroit is an hour and 20-minute drive for me, so I'm thinking like, dude, maybe I come out and watch you compete.
Cool. I wish I could.
We have. I think there could be a couple people going out. It actually worked out really cool. My coach is an online coach, but she lives in Detroit. So I met her once already when we were over there for something. We went and worked out at her gym with her. And then she's actually gonna be able to handle me on the powerlifting meet day. So that's really cool. Instead of having to have like
good that you have a handler. I went solo because my coach was in Florida. So I was doing a meet day by myself, which I definitely don't recommend, because you don't want to be stressing about all that shit. You just need somebody there that's going to give you all your snacks, all your fuel, all your water. Like, please just keep the gummy bears coming.
Lift that. do this.
Yeah.
Got it.
That should be your only job. Show up and lift that heavy fucking weight.
Exactly.
Are you a USAPL or?
Yes.
Okay. You got your singlet picked out. That was so weird for me. Like, man, do I have to really wear a singlet?
Yes, I have one. Am I happy to wear it? No, not at all.
Yeah. That was outside of my comfort zone. Absolutely.
Yeah, I put it on again the other day. I was just wanting to try it out, and I was like, yeah, this is just not my thing. But
piece of advice: be very mindful with the socks you choose. Make sure they're regulation, because they weren't going to let me compete with my socks, but I stretched them so far up to cover the full leg Because, for deadlifts, that's why they require those. So you don't get blood on the bar.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned that. Actually, I was just watching my coach just competed in a competition a couple weeks ago, and I was watching the live stream, and they called out somebody actually for having too long of socks then, because they're like,
really?
It can't.
Oh, because then it counts probably as like a full piece suit or something.
I don't know. It went up above his kneecap. So they're like, next time push it down below. I'm like,
yeah, because that little bit of elasticity right there is going to add that extra bounce in your.
Who knows?
Yeah,
but no, I'm really excited
for you.
Yeah, thank you. I went to nationals last year with my friend, and then she went to Worlds in Australia, and that was super cool to see. And now I'm just ready to get out there for myself. So it's really excited for it.
I've never watched a powerlifting event in person other than participating in it. But I was addicted to the atmosphere. Like I'm doing, like it's immediately after I was I'm so fucking doing this again. I haven't done it. I don't have any plans to compete again. I'm sure I will one day, but just the excitement and the adrenaline was worth it.
Yeah, it definitely is very contagious. That's why after that, I had no plans on powerlifting. And then after that first nationals meet that I went with my friend, and she won, like, it was just that atmosphere, everyone just cheering on. I feel like it's like, yes, you're going up against everybody. It's just like, everybody wants everybody to do so well that day. And that I love the atmosphere.
Yeah. I know you're still 6 weeks out, so you probably haven't talked about game day numbers or meet day numbers or anything. Is the goal just to green light and like get the first successful meet under your belt, or are you actually going to like try to go for like PRs or anything like that?
Probably some personal PRs for myself. I'm really just kind of doing this me versus me. I'm not really.
Yes, I love that.
I'm not expecting to hit any records of any type or anything like that. I'm not anywhere near that. I'm very new to powerlifting, but just me versus me and hit some of my own records. I'm definitely planning on pushing myself outside of the comfort zone there and just having a good time with it.
Nice.
Hell yeah. I love that. Well, good luck in 6 weeks.
Thank you.
Chase. Wow. Great conversation today. Would you say, Beth?
Absolutely. I believe that this podcast is going to help a lot of people.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Totally. You gave some really good tips in there and just your perspective and experience too. It's always nice to know that you're not in this alone.
Right.
You're not the only one struggling with whatever it is that you're struggling with right now. Anybody listening, you're not alone.
Definitely not alone.
So Chase, we would love it if you gave yourself an opportunity to talk about your social media platforms, where people can find you. I know you have a Facebook community. Like if people want to connect with you, what can they do? Sure.
Yeah. So you can find me. Instagram is probably the easiest place to like start. And then you can just find the link in the bio there and it goes everywhere else. But @changing_Chase is my username. Same on TikTok and Facebook group, Chasing Health, Secrets to Losing 50 plus pounds, chasinghealthllc.com. All those things you can find me.
Okay.
Instagram is the best place to start.
Okay.
Always. Do you have exciting announcements or anything coming up? Like anything that you're working on that you're going to be releasing soon, or like you're just plugging away, just doing the damn thing and helping your clients?
trying to just help, really focus on the clients, and also, I have an amazing assistant coach, Abigail, actually crushing with her clients as well. And we're just working on, trying to help as many people as we can. And a couple things here in the works in the upcoming, but things that are still in the works, I'm not going to announce just yet.
Sure.
They can keep an eye out, give me a follow, and you can keep an eye out for those things.
There you go.
No.
keep them on their toes.
Yeah.
Love
awesome. Well, thanks again, Chase, for your time today. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Absolutely. Thank you guys again. Thanks so much.
Hope you enjoyed this episode, so why not share with a friend who needs to hear it? Send us a DM on Instagram or email us at cutthecrappod@gmail.com and join our Patreon at patreon.com/cutthecrappodcast. As always, we appreciate you and thanks for